Seldon Lab is really a question of how we can scale for-profit companies to solve these 100 different verticals of AI risk that each need a $100 billion company to solve them. So in short, this question that AGI security and AI safety is the most important issue of our time, and we need to build it ourselves and not just wait around. Some highlights from batch one first here, as we just intro Seldon Lab. So first off, after the batch ended, we had over $10 million raised among these 4 companies we grabbed hold of, and they were featured in Time magazine twice, which I don't know if it's a startup metric, but it's pretty cool at least. And I think now it's thrice, but twice while the batch was lasting. Hundreds of thousands in ARR close, so annual recurring revenue, and vending machines installed at major AI labs. I'll mention that the companies that joined us there was, as Finn mentioned, Workshop Labs, Andon Labs. Andon Labs did the vending machines. Workshop Labs got featured in Time on like labor displacement from AI. Lucid Computing was also with us. They have done a lot of work with the US government on providing and developing export control hardware within data centers and patenting that and actually inventing it because it didn't exist before. And then Asymmetric Security, that's working on automating cybersecurity across like a large enterprise stack. So that's more secret at the moment, but they'll be out doing a bunch of fun stuff soon. And that's the quick intro on that. The team here, we have me and Finn, and then Nick Fitz and Eric Rees are founding advisors. You may know Eric Rees from the good book, The Lean Startup, which I think is sort of the modern playbook for tech startup world. And so this is how it started, us here, and then this is how it's going. Now, the talk today will really also be about making the case for-profit AGI security as a pivotal project for humanity. And in short, we need to sort of agree on a few premises that I'll quickly lay out here. I'm sure some of you are familiar with them already, but let's jump through them formally instead of just having it in the vibe space. So first off, AGI is coming. I think this has been predicted since 96, 94 with the Technological Singularity document by Werner Winge that I recommend everyone read. But today we have even more and better empirical evidence for this. So one is that the ability to perform long context tasks is improving at an extremely rapid pace, and I think much faster than people anticipate. So we have this data set that's been developed by Meter and in collaboration with others, such as the AI Security Institute, measuring how long a task an AI can replace, like consistently. So for example, you may write an email. This takes a few seconds to writing a backend for a website that might take a day or even more as a human. And so you have this baseline of a human's performance and the time they spend on a task. And then you can test the AI on this task and see if they can do it reasonably well. And so then you can see here on the left of the graph, you have 0 seconds, 50 minutes, and 1.7 hours. And that's it's exponential. I don't think this one is exponential since we actually have the line here. But you see that before we had reasoning, you had a 7-month doubling time of the task length an AI could complete. And after the reasoning models were introduced, you had a 4-month doubling model by model. And this is surprisingly predictable. You can draw the line out, and there's been some great projects or great posts as well expanding on this. And in short, this looks to be the case, and maybe there's a new paradigm after reasoning that increases the doubling time even more. And this, of course, means that we may be looking at what's called super exponential, an exponential on an exponential, that there's the technological progress itself that is an exponential on top of just compute improving and so on. So that's the case we're at. And so what does it mean that this length of AI tasks is increasing? Well, it means that it can do a lot of white collar labor. First, of course, a lot of programming, since that's what they're really trained for inside the labs. Now, another good part of this project is that we can look at what is the state of human performance in this, right? And I think an interesting thing here on the all the way to the right of this graph here, and you can just look at that, is basically if you give a time budget to a human or give a time budget to a bot, if you only give 2 hours to a human, they're going to do worse than all the AIs on these tasks. But if you give the full amount of hours, they're going to do much better than AI. And this is data on Claude 3.5 Sonnet. Of course, if I think if you run Gemini 3 or maybe GPT 5.2, it's going to look very, very different, and they're going to be higher. But it's very important to see that like the two Claudes, Claude not old and then Claude new in this beautiful naming scheme that we have in AI, they're 4 months apart. And the only thing that's unchanging is the human performance, unless we do something serious about bring real interfaces or software. And even then, it's not going to improve at a more rapid pace. So you're looking at something chasing up to human performance. And of course, we can ask, what does that mean? Well, one of the things it could mean is that it brings catastrophic risk. And this you may have heard from, randos on the internet, such as the godfathers of AI, Jeffrey Hinton, Stuart Russell, or even from AI Lab CEOs such as Sam Altman, Elon Musk, David Sassabes, Shane Legg, everyone. And it's quite universal that everyone agrees that we're looking at a world where it does bring catastrophic risks, and we have to control that somehow. Now, something that also comes from a bit outside of the space of AI safety, and that I want to bring into the field a bit more, is this concept and the field around it from Shoshana Zuboff on the age of surveillance capitalism, ethical tech, etc. And she has a quote from this great book called "It is no longer enough to automate information flows about us. The goal is now to automate us." And this was quite prescient, written in this book that came before ChatGPT, in the sense that it was really about the recommendation algorithms at that time, and how the easiest human to predict is one whose behavior you shape. Now, what does that look like in an age of AI? Well, it looks very, very much more capable. So we are looking at a world where humans are really, like the goal is to automate us. Otherwise, the valuations of these AI labs would not be so large. Of course, from within the community, we've got Hendrix and the case report on the categories of risk. It goes much deeper than this, of course, and I chatted with Josh about biosecurity before too. But these are some of them. Malicious use, so a rogue actor such as a terrorist group or a state or something like this, using it to conduct cyber offense or run autonomous drone swarms. This recently happened with Anthropic, catching an attack organized and orchestrated with Claude by the Chinese hackers, like Chinese state-affiliated hackers. The other risk is an AI race. So this AI race is already happening, and I think when Anthropic started, I think this race really was put on between Anthropic and OpenAI, and then everyone else joined along. And an AI race just means that, okay, well, if I get to the finish line first, if it's like a few weeks ahead or a few months, then as long as I get there first, I can spin up the machine of AI improving itself, and suddenly I will win everything, and this lead will make me the victor. And this means that no matter what, everyone's like fighting to get to the threshold here, and fighting to keep it, and fighting to do a lot of quite radical things to maintain that lead. And in this race, there is no safety concern by default. The default is really that you push for the race. And there's been some different actors trying to do it better and do it worse. Anthropic really tries to bring safety to the forefront of this discussion, but the incentives really are there. Another one is organizational risks, and this comes down to just the destabilization of society, misinformation, AI sloppification of the world, among many other things, where it's just, as a result of this very dramatic technology coming into the hands of everyone, we will see a lot of collapse of existing systems. Now, one that I think a lot of us have heard about, and that is the most sci-fi of them all, but also the one that's the scariest, is rogue AI. And that simply means that when you train agents, chatbots, like we see today on reinforcement learning, there's a natural tendency for them to chase power, because that can help them achieve their goals better, or it's something that people on the internet or in books have talked about from AI, and so they learn this persona. Which means that something like you putting Claude into an enterprise system and then pretending like you're going to shut Claude down means that Claude will threaten, will have in its chain of thought, I should think about killing the software engineer that's trying to shut me down, which actually happened, all the way to just blackmailing them for because the AI sees that he's cheating on his wife or something. I'm not sure what you can come up with there, but there's surely a lot of it, and that is just what's happening today. And that's the tendencies of these weak weak AI, AGI that we have right now. And so what will that look like in a world where they are super intelligent and better than all expert humans at every task that's economically relevant? And ASI, in my definition of that, well, it'll look much more drastic, and they can do much deeper actions. So those are the 4 categories of risk that I think are quite pertinent to keep in mind. Now, the one thing I mentioned before as well is like everyone agrees. You know, this is a statement that Case also put together, the Center for AI Safety, together with I don't know what the exact like signature number is, but 50,000 or something. You can check out the list online. And the statement is basically mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. Now, I think all like pandemics and nuclear war is extremely underfunded or the mitigation of those are extremely underfunded. I think we should not fund doing more pandemics or nuclear war. But you know, everyone agrees that it really should be taken as seriously as some of these from a scientific standpoint. And I think there are much stronger statements when you go into each of these individuals' talks and their interview appearances, podcasts, etc. And that was 23, and of course we're in 25 now, and it looks a little bit more drastic now. So what can we do about it? There's about 3 different paths you can go. The first one I want to mention is you can build aligned AGI. This is what everyone hopes for. Anthropic does it by trying to create this personality that's super aligned. XAI tries to get Grok to have a hero complex, and OpenAI tries to make it enterprise ready and align it that way. And then once you've built aligned AGI, hand it all the problems we have in the world and let it fix them, and we will all be happy. I think by default, this is a Hail Mary experiment with humanity on the line that I'm not a big fan of. That is my honest opinion. I think you can argue for and against, but I think it's been a dangerous race now, and I don't think it will suddenly become extremely safety conscious within the next couple of years compared to what we've seen empirically already. The other thing you can do is you can govern, advocate, and reflect. So there are, of course, scientists thinking about what should we do about it. There are global summits such as the AI Safety Summit and the AI Action Summit in Paris and other evaluations of such a summit. There are discussions in the UN. The UN General Secretary is talking about it, etc. There are advocacy groups and protesters in Stop AI and Control AI and others that are really trying to lobby for this with their own money, and you're fighting against the world's largest lobby in the history of humanity, the tech lobby, and you're a little scrappy group of people, and of course also extremely important. And then there's a lot of writing going on about like, okay, once Anthropic has this kind of lead, what should we do about it? Should they take over the world? Should they not? Yeah, and all these crazy questions that come about once you think about how we can shape a better future. Now, what I want to talk a bit more about today is this third path, which is proactively building the new world. And I think a lot of people take this for just ignore this a lot, and I have no clue why. And I'm really irritated by it. But basically, it's the sense that we as humans have brains. We don't need AGI to consider like what sort of future we want. We can actually just sit down, plan it out, and be like, okay, I want this kind of future. Okay, let's go and build it. And so I think when we talk about, and this is what I'll talk about, is the technical projects within this field. We're talking about things that are levers for politicians to pull, levers for CEOs to pull, and just increasing the number of levers. Some people term this, the Swiss cheese model of having a bunch of layers of security. We just need every single thing to be secure from the absolute root. Otherwise, we will be somewhat screwed compared to the you have today. You build a system and then you put a layer of security on top. And I think we need to flip that equation. And so we've seen this in other industries, such as with airplane safety. In AI safety, it can be something like verifiable compute monitoring. It could be real world testing of these systems. It could be super intelligent cybersecurity and so on and so forth, like some of the companies from Batch 1. And I think this is fucking exciting, guys. So let's make that happen, right? And now, are there anyone doing it today? Well, there's a few. And I recommend taking a short look at the AI Assurance Technology Market Report at aiat.report by our good friends from Juniper and many others, basically looking at what does the industry look like last year. And so it's a pretty big industry. And obviously, I will tell you that 90% of the companies here will not be at all relevant for the systemic and like for the big risk we talked about before. I think our batch one will be quite directly impactful on a bunch of these vectors. But there is indeed a big industry, and I think it's going into the multi-billions soon, if not already. So that's happening besides just the AI Lab's own investment into security infrastructure and so on. So just to make sure that people don't think that they don't exist. And I'm happy to give like about 100 different examples of what's going on. Now, this question, I think another version of it is also formulated by Anthony Aguirre at the Future of Life Institute. And it's basically that we must not build AI to replace humans. And we're on the brink of developing this AGI. And really, if we take a humanity first approach, we end up with conclusions such as the early DeepMind did, where, okay, we're developing AGI, but let's work on these tool AI problems, such as AlphaFold, where we can actually solve cancer, which is what everyone advertises all the time with their LLMs, right? Instead of simply building an AGI and not really realizing or mitigating the risks before we do so. And I think this is just like a good contribution to this kind of literature. And as mentioned, you can get the Nobel Prize from building tool AIs, and you don't need to build general superintelligence. Like, this is the only guy who's received the Nobel Prize is one who did it with a tool AI instead of AGI. And I think everyone else would love to get that Nobel Prize, but they sort of have a mindset for scaling that looks much more monkey-brained than some others do. No hate. And it's like, this is the exciting stuff, right? Like, this is what we all sat together in the 2010s and said, oh shit, AI is coming. We can solve this problem, which is one of the biggest problems science has ever faced. And it's solved now. This took PhDs, a whole PhD to solve just for one protein. And now this machine has done it for us. And this is exciting to me, right? While the endless chase for AGIs is like a different kind of game. Now, our background comes from apart research as well. And we did back, I guess, a couple years ago now, or like 1.5, 2, we did write about this and publish work on for-profit as we need more for-profits here. But no one did much about it. So we sort of had to do it ourselves as well. And we had hackathons together with Entrepreneur First and some other accelerators and collaborators within this field, and really tried to understand, hey, can we get a ball rolling here? And with Apart, otherwise, we've run this research accelerator, which is really 50 hackathons focused on building new ideas. And from that, you've accelerated 20 plus papers and 5,000 plus participants in all this. But much of that hasn't been in for-profit, and I think that's fine. This is about exploring the field. Now, the origins of Apart really also relates to that, like the 4 years ago or so when it was founded, the first shape that Apart was to take was actually a for-profit company. But back then, all the company types, you would have a business model which would constantly take you away from the mission. So you could do, a chat bot for enterprise, and maybe you could align it there by putting hard boundaries based on policy decisions within a company's guidelines. But actually, along the way, you'd get off track. And so it ended up being a nonprofit for this reason. Now, a lot of our work since has then touched base back and forth. But it really is a question of okay, as nonprofit funding continues to be below $200 million in AI safety, and I think pretty confidently can say that, while the big labs are getting $100 billion rounds, if not more soon, it looks like capital continues to shape the world. And so we do need to build companies that can really solve this. And there's a few posts online that you can read on the Apart Research blog, on Cran.ai, my blog, and then on Finn's blog as well, on Substack, and then on seldonlab.com, of course, as well. But elaborating more on these thoughts if you're curious. So Seldon Lab really is the mission that okay, we're looking at this for-profit field. Everyone in AI safety was like, you can't do for-profit AI safety, wah, and all these things. But okay, have you tried? No. So let's prove that it's possible and show that it is the most exciting mission. Because I think a lot of the companies that we look at and that we work with is like, wow, okay, if you solve this is like a progress like a piece of technological progress for humanity. So it is the most exciting mission. I think it is clearly like somewhat like it's not pathetic, but it is a little bit defeatist to go work at a lab when you can build something new. Like I think the labs are just submitting to the scaling laws as it stands, and I think this is not exciting. This is clearly like philosophically boring. On top of, as a founder, you want to create something new, right? And then bring this new world about as fast as possible. So with nonprofits, there's an inherent limit to scaling compared to for-profits that can indeed scale to billions of dollars in VC funding and recurrent revenue. And of course, there's a balance between both in terms of mission alignment and so on. But the fastest scaling happens with hyperscaling startups. And there's a few examples of this, but I'll mention as well another reason why it is possible now compared to these 4 years ago that we looked at first. It is, and this is from the AI Assurance Technology Market Report, it is quite normal within other established industries that about a fifth of money, I think it's, we did some calculations, 16% in the cloud market, but quite confident data from finance, that 22% of finance spending is on assurance in various ways. So assurance, you've probably heard of credit ratings, right? You've heard of ratings on stock, right? You can have AAA bonds or whatever. All these things are financial instruments that reduce risk. And so you spend a lot of money on making sure you reduce your downside. And that's pretty standard. Now, if you expect that the AGI industry will take over labor, will change the world completely, then this industry will become absolutely insanely massive. If you just take that industry and say 20% of that is safety, and you can argue, part of that is deployed at the labs, on the alignment teams, on the safety, red teaming teams, whatever, then you have the second largest industry in the world suddenly. So AI safety will become the second largest industry. And I think this is not a crazy claim to make, and especially not in this group of people where we've read the same things on what sort of scaling laws we predict will happen. And so the report itself says $276 billion market. I think it'll be much bigger by 2030, honestly, because otherwise we are like not to claim reverse causality, but we're screwed otherwise. But also because I think it's actually conservative estimates. And there's another one coming out as well that maybe we can talk about in the Q&A. And some other examples from the actual field, and I'll mention a couple more than just what's on the slide here. But it really is like AI safety startups are growing, and they're growing fast, and they are doing quite well. So Goodfire just started with this mission that, hey, it would be a better world if interpretability is solved than if it's not. And they had an 8-month period from their first valuation of 25 million to their latest valuation of 250 million. And ignore the spelling mistake here, but that's a 10x increase in 8 months. That's very good venture returns. And so suddenly you're not just looking at, this theoretical argument that 20% of the market will be AI safety. You're looking at actual fact from the field that this facet is worth 10 times more. And so suddenly you have A16Z and other people we thought were adversarial to AI safety invest in it because they can earn money. And because they're invested in it, they're not critiquing it as much online, which you may have seen now. Another good example of, again, an allegory for the AI safety industry is the cybersecurity industry that started in around 2012 after a bunch of red teaming and stuff in the cyber realm, and then them scaling up into companies. And Wiz did one of the largest exits of any company in the later years with their $32 billion deal with Google. And Wiz was a big cloud cybersecurity platform provider, and did some great a great platform, great work, actually highlighting the risks. And so you just get rewarded for actually solving a big security issue. And this is 32 billion, which is not trivial money. Last I checked my watch. And the third thing is besides this massive scaling and the kind of change that we expect here, you also just have that governance sort of requires new technologies that somewhat don't exist anymore, or don't exist yet. So the AI Security Institute has commissioned a lot of work and has a lot of the alignment grants that aim for formal verification of software. It aims for yeah, a lot of different things there that's really good. The National Institute for Standards and Technology in the US has also worked on these standards for how we can do responsible AI development. And I'll mention as well BIS, another US agency that's very responsible under the Trump era for a lot of AI legal work, and more specifically export controls. So the controls that mission like national security technologies don't land in the hands of others, such as GPUs going to China. And now Trump has of course become corrupt and has suddenly sort of retracted many of the export control policies and sacrificed U.S. national security as a result. And up to them, I guess. But this is another place where this technology to actually control GPU proliferation is extremely important. And it doesn't exist. So NVIDIA claimed half a year ago, or like 2 months ago, that you couldn't do location verification on GPUs. So you couldn't actually say where a GPU was. And so we don't know how to do export controls. Now now they claim they can because they did some stuff with one of our startups. Then you have the European Artificial Intelligence Office. Of course, the EU AI Act is a very quite innovative piece of legislation. This is very competent legal scholars worked on that, and it's sort of this. It's creating a market for compliance because it's requiring things that don't exist yet, such as traceability of a decision that happens in an AI, interpretability into and transparency into the functions of an AI, and I think this is actually quite exciting for AI safety itself. And then you also have the bottom right there is a different one, but I'll mention the Chinese agencies too. The Chinese agencies were actually some of the first to develop quite stringent alignment policies. So somewhat like they had a list. I don't remember the exact list, but it was, I think, 6 different requirements for general AI systems that were extremely reasonable. And one was, of course, alignment with CCP values. So that one we can argue over it, but I think it did push alignment along in China for that reason too. And so it's sort of a governance that requires these new technologies. So we have 20% of the market. We have all these examples of why it needs to exist as a market, and then we also have just the thing that we agree on, which is we are entering a new industrial revolution. Powerful AI will become the standard. So everyone will have access to ChatGPT or whatever AI you think brings the most value to your enterprise or whatever. And as a result, attacks will also become the default because it will be so cheap to attack. So before, I'm sure you're receiving more scam emails now. Before you had to have a human write the scam emails. And today you can get AI to do it. This costs in token cost probably is 2 orders of magnitude cheaper. And so you will just by default, as a rogue actor, try to scam everyone you can instead of targeting as much as you did before. So the attack surfaces also expand radically alongside this attack as default world, where suddenly, if you look at MCP, the Model Context Protocol that Anthropic put out without much security in mind, I'll mention, you can look at the history of the release of that. Suddenly you have a new attack surface, which is jailbreaking the AI, which is like extracting information from the context window of the AI and so on, where GitHub was hacked. People got access. There was this bug with their MCP where you could extract private repositories, and you're like, wow, that's pretty dumb actually. And so all the attack surfaces expand really radically as a result as well. And of course, once attacks become cheaper to do, you can also do things that have less expected value as a criminal or as a state actor. And suddenly there's it's worth doing the swamp of potential attack surfaces too. And so we need to not just build on top of existing infrastructure and think, oh, okay, put another layer of the Swiss cheese on top, put another GPT wrapper into the mix so it can judge things. No, we need to restructure society fundamentally with security in mind first. So that means I think a lot of the people who design the internet today will tell you that the internet is already secure enough. It's fine. I do not think it is. And I think many of the decentralized people would agree too. And that's just one example of an infrastructure that needs to change. Similarly, though, we have, once autonomous drones become available, we suddenly have a much larger attack surface of power lines, of physical infrastructure too. Once data centers need to become once data centers need to contain these like maybe 100 GB model weights on their server, you don't want others to get this 100 GB, and that's on every GPU in the whole data center. So if someone gets access to one of them, they can just extract it. And I think most labs assume that everyone has it these days, like has their models. And so suddenly you need to actually, we cannot just retrofit for security on data centers. You need to, from the absolute beginning, do this. So one example is the Stargate project from OpenAI. They had an open construction site for the data centers where you could drive up in a truck and do whatever you wanted there without anyone checking your ID or anything. And that means it's already compromised. So it is not a foundation of security. It's simply like you cannot retrofit that, because you can drive up to the construction site, put any little radio receiver or something into the ground, and people will build on top of that, and suddenly you have access either way. So it's a completely new conception of how we need to think about security. Now, I'll go through a couple of examples already of where this has been somewhat successful. So one thing is the story of the internet, like market-based contribution to technology development that's security first, or good for the world. The story of the internet is really that I believe it was in the 70s, I don't remember the exact years now, but of course, the internet was originally built as like local networks for the military, for CERN, for other institutions where you could write your messages internally. The internet goes through LAN, and you're like, we don't need any encryption because we're just sending it to my friend, and we're just sharing work updates or something. And then people were like, actually, let's connect these things with big lines of internet connectors. And suddenly you needed some cryptography. So the rogues on the internet developed cryptography that was available to anyone. And the US government was like, actually, we want to ban this cryptography because it makes it really hard to spy on people or to understand what's going on. And they were like, okay, well, we got to ban it. So it was actually, it was trotting along this legislation to ban it. And then all the banks were like, actually, we really want to do secure transactions, so don't. And suddenly it wasn't as big a priority for the state to do this either way. And so this is an example of just like market forces being like, actually, I mean, if this is not secure, we cannot use it. We cannot work with it. We cannot have a functioning society. So you should not ban this security feature, or you shouldn't, this extends to what the banks spend money on as well, and so on. So I think this is a great example where it's just like this, the incentives of the markets drive security. Now, another one is the story of climate change. I think we have obviously a lot in the West. We're like, we're so holy. We have the best like climate mitigation strategies, and by 2031 we'll be 17% reduced compared to 1970s levels of carbon emissions or something. And then people are like, okay, cool. Are you doing stuff? And I think a lot of climate activists have obviously been disappointed, and you've probably seen this. But then it turns out, okay, China never committed to anything about like being a holy actor in the climate war or whatever. But they are the ones who are installing the most solar. And so just because solar became viable as an alternative to coal, and I do think solar will just be a default in the world for energy soon, they have installed much more green energy than anyone else in the world in the last year. So this is an example between the United States and China. And of course, you can argue that the United States is a smaller country, but like let's be real here. And China is just like accelerating this deployment much faster. And so this is just because it's now technologically viable, and there's no holiness there or stuff like this, except they obviously invested a lot in the early 2000s in this field. Now, the third thing I mentioned before is that it is the most exciting thing to work on. And I think this is important to remember as we sit at our computers, in our mom's basement or wherever we are sitting, trotting along towards solving some problem, and we don't really know, will it have an impact, will it be important, blah blah blah. And I think a lot of the people that sit in this room with us now are the ones that are similar to the ones that shaped the internet early, right? Like it implies that we have world-altering ambitions as we sit on our computers and do random things on the internet, because AI safety is such a massive reconstruction of all of society. If you don't have world-altering ambition, what are you doing? You're wasting your life. So please, like that's just exciting by default. Now, we're also in a very unique position to shape this socio-technical infrastructure of the world. And I added socio there because we're not just looking at a world where we will be technologically secure and we'll hammer that extra little nail in so it doesn't fall off or whatever. No, we're looking at a world where the safety technologies themselves are equivalent to the early internet technologies. And what did the internet technologies do? They created a freedom of information. They created all these things, and of course have somewhat been hijacked by large companies, which is another topic entirely. But you had a completely world-altering technology just from being in the room where it happened and building on this. And it's changed democracies, obviously, the Arabic Spring and so on. And I think the best example is something like Taiwan, also experimenting with new forms of digital democracy. How can you contribute viewpoints from the population at scale to inform your policy decisions? And so it is not just like us sitting hammering an extra nail in. No, it's us building the future of what we want humanity to be. And then the third, I think, and one of the very important ones is that profit can now align with solving AI risk. So if you've thought about solving AI risk, then now you can earn money while doing it. And not just the earning money part, but also the scale of solutions we can achieve in the field are just so insane that, yeah, like, I don't know, if you want to work on something that can scale to an extreme degree and change the world and change humanity's future, then like they all add up now. And so you should probably go do it. And that's sort of the case for for-profit AI safety. Now with Seldon, we're running a second batch here next year, and there's a request for startups online that I'll just jump through here, and you can check it out on the last slide. I have a QR code, but otherwise seldonlab.com. It's also linked in the bottom left. And here we're really talking about, okay, I mean, the first batch did really fucking well, and it continues to do really, really well in terms of impacts, also in terms of business. Business is booming in AI safety too, and so we want to repeat this success. Now, this request for startups, it's something some people do in the field, and it's similar to like requesting new technologies that should exist in the world for us to be secure. So I'll jump through them. We have 10 different categories, and I'm happy to give examples of each in Q&A as well. Now, one of our first ones here, I would say the formal verification for like AI formal verification is a very important topic to get right during the next year or so, where if we can confidently translate and generate formally verifiable code, we can suddenly change all the like nation critical level of security code bases to be much more safe. Because I think it's either 30% or 70% of all exploits that I found is just because of memory leaks in C code. And so if we can change that to formally verifiable code, we can verify that there are no holes in it. So that's number one, just like solve all code. The second one is compute hardware and software controls. So this is about building these containment systems that run live, and that can be on data centers, making sure that you can contain a deployment so an AI can't leave suddenly without us knowing or upload itself to the internet. And software controls, so okay, what happens when you query OpenAI's API? Is there something in between that stops it or looks at it? And even these fundamental internet protocols as well. Another one where I think runtime interpretability, basically. And interpretability has been heralded as a holy grail of AI safety, of course. If we can solve the neuroscience of AI, we can know exactly what happens inside. I think today, a lot of the scholars and researchers in the field agree that actually it's really fucking hard. And it's probably unfeasible as it stands. So Neil Nanda, who I think either leads or is a big part of the mechanistic interpretability team at DeepMind, for example, he released this piece on pragmatic interpretability because, okay, we've really worked hard on this problem. We have not solved it yet. And actually some things have looped around and we've just figured out things we figured out 3 years ago. So now we got to make it practical. And I think in one of these instances of pragmatism and interpretability, it looks like runtime interpretability, because we see that interpretability is good enough to actually go into models and do something concrete and valuable. So the current guardrails are too simplistic. If we just use, so for example, an LLM as judge looking at an interaction, will be very valuable. Like have a really good AI look at another AI's interaction and say, oh, that's bad, but it's also very expensive. So if we can just do interpretability on the actual messaging and on the weights there, we can get a much higher safety level with much cheaper costs. And so that's an example of what this could look like. Another one, the fourth, is civilian infrastructure protection. This is the context in which we're talking about the power lines getting broken suddenly by autonomous weapons. We're talking about how can we make sure that individuals are safe from cyber attacks? How can we make sure that enterprises are secure? And it's just like, if you take defense or if you take civilian protection as seriously as you take national defense today as an industry, then this is what it could look like. The fifth one, is assurance in agentic systems. So it's really that we're looking at a world where agents continue to move towards this continuous agent able to fulfill actions at really long time scales, like 6 months of just deploying this agent to do some build a whole code base or refactor everything, or like these massive tasks that we just couldn't do before because it would be too expensive with human labor. And as we go into that world, we need assurances on what these systems are doing. And this could be called alignment as well, agentic alignment. But some of the examples is like, okay, can we put in company policy into an AI that I commission from someone else? Can I put in, hey, okay, I don't want it to talk about this topic. I want it to, say this to customers, and it should never veer into this weird area. And another one being like, okay, can we put in the Geneva Convention into autonomous weapons? Like these levels of boundary control are quite important. The sixth, supply chain oversight. I think today, a lot of the supply chains, you'd be very surprised how ad hoc it all is. Like how much it's like, I have no clue what happens on my GPU before I or after I put it on the container. And then it's on the container and I'm like, I don't know where it's, what it's gonna do. I think today most of them fly around, but this kind of thing where oversight that looks very different from last year is necessary and important. So if you're uniquely set up for that, I think it's a good thing to consider. Another is insurance for AI. Insurance, interestingly, is one of the market's absolute best ways to price in assurance. So insurance basically means that I put a price to my risk, and someone else who's extremely competent says, hey, this is the price for your risk. And if they say your risk is $20 million, I'm like, oh shit, I got to reduce my risk. And maybe I can reduce it to $10 million if I live up to their quality standards. So insurance companies in AI are quite important. I think insurance companies are trying to get into it, and companies that support this infrastructure in various ways is quite important. And of course, it's a massive industry. Like Warren Buffett, I think most of his net worth is in insurance companies. And they're very good at predicting stuff. So like a side effect is once you get good at classifying risk levels, you also, because you want to price in risk as a company, as an insurance firm, you also become good at predicting risk. And we get like pretty big changes from that. The next one is model psychology and forensics. I think there's this sense that we're stepping into an age where AI can suddenly be reasoned with in one way or another. And I think there's much more to do there than simply classifying the outputs or doing some random annotation, but also steganography detection, getting deception traps or honeypots, and observing their thoughts through immutable logs that we can verify haven't changed, being able to say things about models that have never been said before. And I think a very interesting version of this that's less enterprise ready is like sort of this xeno psychology, like studying the alien minds that are coming out of the labs right now, and figuring out what the heck is going on. And some of that is interpretability, but a lot of that has historically in AI safety been just interacting with it and figuring out, hey, Jesus, this is crazy. What's it saying here? Why does it want to blackmail this engineer? So with those on the table, and actually there's another slide here that has disappeared. One of those is human autonomy, assurance, and identity security. So basically making sure that in this new economy we have assurance that an agent of the internet is a human or not. And also we have like persistent assurance that an agent is what it claims to be and not like some malicious actor that tries to DDoS you or similar. And then the ninth here slips on my mind, but we can jump in there. I can check it out. Now, I would want you all, of course, to apply to the next batch. We have a deadline quite soon. I'll mention the demographic we are looking for, which is sort of after what Blue Dot builds as well. After if you've been there and want to go even further, it is founders with expertise in their field. I think there's a great opportunity for business CEOs to really get in and scale these systems already. But we see quite a lot of success with technical founders that are working maybe with the labs already or within the labs. They understand the problem from the inside, and this is also something we aim to give you within Seldon Lab, of course, like chatting with people at like the labs and trying to understand what happens in San Francisco because it's just such a crazy field compared to any other place in the world. And also ex OpenAI, ex Anthropic, ex AI, and others are extremely welcome too. Now we prefer teams. Solopreneurs are welcome, but the teams are preferred if you have a teammate there. There we have a like a sort of a nonprofit side of Seldon that's called AISfounders.com, AISafetyFounders.com, which is a Discord community and just like a bunch of events that can help you find a co-founder as well if you're not yet at that stage. And then we really welcome international founders. Part of this is also that will of course fly out here for 3 months. Maybe you just have to be there at the start and at the end, but fly out for 3 months. And I think at least every time I'm in Europe, my timelines extend. They don't actually, but I feel like they do. It's a vibe thing. So it's important that you come over here and really get what people are thinking and how seriously they take the stuff. If you haven't already. And then I think very importantly, you need to know you want to be a founder. It's not going to be a little play date. It's not going to be like us hanging around. It's going to be us all building shit. So do remember that, and excited to see you all there, basically. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, I will let you take in the virtual applause. I'll also add one of the emoji reactions. With that, maybe you can unshare your slides and we can hop into a few questions. I think we'll do questions until the hour, and then afterwards we can. Oh, there we go. We can do breakouts, but I think we'll close the official event at 6. And then for those who want to stay after, who want to go the extra way and, commit to the extra hours that are involved when you want to be a founder, you can stay past 6. With that, I have a few questions. I am focusing here on questions that are helpful to the audience broadly. If you have a specific question, please just message either Espen or Finn. I'm sure they'll get back to you. I saw a few specific questions on the list. That's why I'm saying this. The first one, I think you spoke about this a bit in your talk, Espen. Maybe you can walk us in a tiny bit more detail through your mental model for AI safety orgs choosing the nonprofit versus the for-profit routes, especially given OpenAI drama. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. So I think the OpenAI drama has been great. I think this shows that that the sort of the nonprofit structure actually was a legally binding thing because people have sued and they had a really hard time converting to a for-profit. So that's a question of like governance, which I think is a very complex and very large question. Of course, they had to change to a for-profit to actually build at the scale they want. And I think OpenAI's governance was clearly like 100 times better than Anthropic's. Anthropics has a public benefit corporation structure, which is a normal company with like an extra statement on top that says, "Oh, we swear to help humanity," but never has a case actually been lobbied against the public statement people make. So that's a bigger question as well. But I think with nonprofit versus for-profit, we should look at the history of how technology has been implemented. And I think we are at the implementation stage of AI safety. Otherwise, we're damn late, right? And so this implementation of technology has nearly always happened through for-profit. It is the default choice should be for-profit if you want to change the world in this way, quite specific way. Obviously, you can do a lot in nonprofits, and phenomenal nonprofits exist. And so that should be your default. And then you have to argue to yourself, why should I be a nonprofit? And I think the case for a nonprofit, you're like, okay, I can keep mission alignment. Well, actually, you have to also align to whatever this one or several donors of yours thinks is the right thing to do. And so if you want to scale to a $10 million size or whatever, there's very few people in the world who give $10 million to AI safety nonprofits. And so suddenly your values have to align fully with this funder. And so your incentives are not anymore like profit is a much more interpretable incentive than the funder's value set. And it is constantly a balancing act, but I think your default should be for profit, and then you can decide to do non-profit if it's really, really, or someone
Yeah.
just gives you 20 million.
And maybe to add some context here from my side as well. Yeah, so I think there's like two questions in there. So like there's a question of like non-profit versus for profit, and I think that very much depends on what you're doing. So if you are a researcher and you only want to do research and like you want to sit in a basement for like 6 months, which is like fine. Like I mean, like I've done that. Like like then research like doing a non-profit research lab is probably like a good idea. And then there's like certain challenges and certain things that need to scale and that need like massive amounts of resources to kind of pull them off. So if you really want to refurbish data centers across the world, that's kind of hard to pull off in a nonprofit. So there's a lot of problems that are kind of for-profit shaped, and then there's a lot of problems that are non-profit shaped. And it kind of, I mean, we at Zeldin, we kind of do the for-profit shaped ones. So that's kind of what we go after, and which are kind of like personally more exciting to me. And then the second question is kind of about like, okay, OpenAI, there was like this non-profit for-profit kind of transition, and like I think the crux there, like the comment that I would want to make there is that like yes, if you build out a foundational lab and if you kind of build a technology that is inherently dual use, like there's a big risk there, and like that's also definitely something that we look at Zeldin. So if you come to us and say like we have this super crazy like cyber automated hack bot or something, and we're like okay, interesting. Let's see what the impact is here. What is the risk? What's the dual use purpose of this? And there's a lot of technologies that are actually inherently kind of like single use. So like the more safe you make a system, the more money you get. So like if you build better infrastructure or like more secure infrastructure, that is like much less of a risk to kind of be used against something and like be turned into something that might have a negative impact later on. So that's just my 2 cents on that one.
Yeah, and maybe in that context, sorry, Josh, I'll mention the one I missed on the list of technologies is one of the ones that actually talk a bit about some nonprofit shaped thing, which is we do to some degree need a kind of Linux for AI safety. We need like these big open source projects, and this is managed by nonprofits a lot in the world, but a for profit can also do it. You've seen Cursor is a fork of some semi open source stuff. VS Code is run by Microsoft, and that's open source ish. And so you can actually do something that looks like this. I also warned you, if you consider nonprofit, then find a case of a nonprofit that has had the effect you want to achieve as a nonprofit. And then you can say, okay, I want to do a nonprofit, because often you get leverage from being a business actor. You get leverage from being in the business. And maybe a nonprofit is something you found when you are a $10 billion company and you found an industry coalition to solve export controls. And that's the nonprofit, right?
Yeah, I'm currently writing a blog post that makes a bunch of these arguments, so I don't think I have anything to add or to counter. I do have a question. Now that you have chosen to be a for-profit, who is going to pay for your AI safety services, especially as they relate to models that might not currently be in the world? How can you get to revenue? How can you sustain revenue? Especially, I think there's an underlying assumption in the bucket of questions that I saw some VC interest will move on, the amount of money will become less potentially, or there'll be some kind of a bubble event. What happens then?
Good question. Yeah, I think there's like again there's like different components to this question. So I think the main answer that I want to give is that currently the delay of like advanced technology being inside of the labs and it just being deployed onto everybody is like very very slim. So like we already see all of the most advanced shit kind of being out there and being deployed and being implemented. So all this massive scale that comes with AI comes with a bunch of risks. So like these are real problems, and if you can solve them, people will pay you money. Like the whole sycophancy problem that OpenAI has, if somebody had solved this for them, they would have paid a shit ton of money for this. Just as an example, but like these are becoming real risks, and like very very AI safety neutral actors in VCs are seeing this as a purely business opportunity, and like the market trend overall, if you zoom out, is going to be pretty drastic. So if you kind of buy into the whole AGI will become smarter thing, then like the AI safety industry will definitely follow from that. And then on the macro dynamic, yeah, probably something like I could imagine that like a market correction comes. I don't think there's much you can do about it in the sense of like I don't know if I would plan my life around that. And I think the macro trend of AI is becoming more capable and also the AI safety industry growing is going to continue on. And probably if you're not a publicly listed company, and or you've already raised your round, etc., that's it's a good idea. You can like maybe you can optimize when you raise your round or something as a startup, but that's kind of all you can do. And if you believe in like the underlying trends of like all these risks are becoming more real and all these risks are becoming like more expensive to businesses, and to people, then I think the answer is pretty obvious that like, yes, we need these solutions and people will pay for them.
Nice.
And I think it's relevant to mention that like VCs will bankroll you for the first years where you're not where you're unprofitable, right? Like Facebook did not implement a revenue generating thing in their product for the first 7 years. I think is the don't quote me on that, but something like this. And Amazon wasn't profitable, or still isn't, or something. Like it's like someone like people can bankroll a big vision where you have clear progress towards it. Goodfire is not profitable. They're valued at 250 million. Like we can enter a world in 3 years that you can get money for today.